I don't. Those of you who've been in the club for a few years may remember that we had uh, uh, Hans Weissluck. That's his first name. Yeah, I should know. I'm a kind of a follower of his. Anyway, he's a German turner, and he really has brought a whole new dimension to wood turning. His website is called Klein und Fein, and that means small and very fine and beautiful. He does exquisite pieces that are turned on many axes, and I urge you, even if you have no intention of trying it, go and just check out his work. It's phenomenal. And when I found out about it, I started doing it. I'm so far away from his level of accuracy. This was a piece that I did about 5 or 6 years ago when we were still meeting at Advantage Lumber, and it, the whole principle is you turn it on one side, maybe one or two or more axes, and then you turn it over and you turn it on the back side. Um, and when you look at it just the right way, you really kind of see a holographic image shining through. He calls them bumblebees or something. And if you, particularly on the yellow one, if you look at it, you really do see, if you look in there, you see something that's like an insect. Anyway, every one is a little bit different. So I really took it as a challenge and started doing quite a few of them. And I thought, it's pretty complicated to just do that on a bowl. They're really more art pieces than bowls. So what I thought I would do tonight is take some of his principles and his techniques and just put them on a rim of a bowl. And that's what this one in the middle is. And actually the little picture that Denny sent around to you showed this rim before I had done it. And I didn't do it on the back side, just the front side. Unfortunately, this sycamore is so busy, the grain is so busy that the technique gets a little bit lost. So I'm going to do it, instead of sycamore, I'm going to do it on a piece of cocobolo, which is simpler. It'll be more like that. But anyway, just take the principles and put a little embellishment on the rim, keeping it a lot simpler, but trying to add that. And then what I wanted to do, and this is the part that isn't going to happen tonight, and I'll tell you why. I was going to take a solid piece of rosewood and embellish this rim here tonight. When you do this, you need to, because you're turning way off center, this mounting piece gets very out of balance, and you have to screw a bunch of blocks of wood on it to get it balanced. And when I did it in my shop as practice, to do that, I needed to build supports for it. This is not for that bowl, for another one that's in the burn pile. This thing all flew off the lathe, and I thought, well, that's not a way to get things started here at Frank's. I didn't want to send a piece out into the audience. I have a reputation for doing that. So we're going to go back to just doing the rim, and then if you want to try it, do it with a flat piece of material and glue it onto a bowl that you have. So it's going to turn you, you'll have to admit to being a segmenter if you do this way. But anyway, this is what I'll show you, making these embellishments on a piece of cocobolo. Any questions so far? Can anybody else see the sort of, I'm going to set these down because I'm going to ask for a volunteer in a minute so they won't tip over. This one in particular, if you look in those circles, maybe I don't know if you can see it at home. I don't know what, there. Anyway, I see insects in there. I hope a few of you do too. But if you look at Weissluck's work, you'll see as the piece turns, and there are some on a website that the camera's going around, and you just see these incredible things appearing and disappearing just because of the way he's done it. And these are fairly delicate turnings. His are way, way finer than this. I mean, the tools that he uses are just tiny little parting tools. Okay, so let's get started. No, I've eliminated that part of the demonstration. First thing is to true up my disc here, and I use a little double-faced tape to help hold it in place while I'm doing that, and then I use my tailstock to get it on the just enough. So all I'm doing now is I'm going to take a parting tool and true this up and then scribe a line, because I'm going to create a jam chuck that will hold this piece for doing the other turning. And for this I will put on a face mask. I know I brought it. There we go. Now it's important that this surface and the edge of your piece be pretty much 90 degrees, if anything undercut very slightly. Okay, now I'm going to cut a recess in this piece here. I didn't get it exactly round, but that's okay. And then this will hopefully be held in place. I won't bother with the tape at that point, but I will put a screw in the center just to keep everything located. Now I need a volunteer. If someone could come up and just, because this MDF is nasty stuff, just hold this and try to suck move that forward a little bit. So, and then just come around and stand here and try to catch it as it's coming off the tool. You won't get it all, but you'll get some of it. What'd I do? Yeah, I got to go some more. I'll be doing a little bit more, but very small amount, so I think that's good with a vacuum. Thank you, Alan. Now it's important for your piece to sit very flat in here, so I usually use it's going to have to be a little bit bigger. At this point, I usually use a gouge to just scrape that outside edge, because you don't really want to take off very much. And if you go too far, I'll show you a little trick to help hold it in. Oh, that's perfect. Wow, the first try. Okay, I think I may have to go just a hair deeper. Yeah, just a little. Close. That should do it. I almost think I got a high spot in there somewhere. Yeah, I think so. Right in there. All right. Now, if you made your jam chuck a little too big, I'm going to put a longer screw in because that felt as though it stripped the threads. If you made your jam chuck a little bit big and you think it's loose, you really don't want this piece turning in here. I do still have my double-faced tape on there, so it probably isn't going to slide, but I'll show you what I do, just a little insurance. All right, for the next part, before I do that, is the layout. And you've got to decide how many of these details you want. 5 on here, but there's still quite a bit of spacing here. I put 6 on this one, and they're much closer together. It's really up to you. I put 6 on that one, and I could have actually put another one on. But you need to make a template to do the layout. So this I made out of this. You can get these circle graphs online, and you just print them out. They have them with all different kinds of spacing. And then I sort of made a master template here for spacing them at either 3, 5, or 7 per piece. So just to keep it simple, I'll take that screw out. I'll just put 3 on this one. Yeah, maybe I'll put 5. So 5 is my my green line. You're all being very quiet. Any questions? Uh-huh. Why green? Because I like green. The important line here, the important spot will be wherever I decide to make my centers. So I'm drawing it all the way in. I'll explain that in a second. Okay, so we've got a choice now of having the center. If you look at this one, the center is outside of the workpiece, out here. That's probably a little easier because particularly if it's the first time you're doing it, when you get into these very tight circles, it's very easy to have your parting tool actually pop that little center out. So, and also, if you're just doing it as an embellishment, and rather than a whole feature, you want to leave enough so you can put a bowl behind it. If you started making great big circles here, your bowl in the center would end up being 2 or 3 inches. So I'm going to do it like this, so my centers will be outside of the workpiece. So I actually don't need this, but what I will do is take my calipers, if I brought them. I know I did. Here. And so I'll choose a center. Well, it'll be arbitrary, but I'll just make it 400 thousandths out from, so that'll be right there. And we'll just do the same thing for all of them. All right, now I want to be sure that this piece does not rotate. Well, let me backtrack a little bit, and now here's a here's the jam chuck that I used to make that one, the one for tonight. When I started doing these, I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if you could just, instead of having to rotate this piece, you keep your chuck in one place and rotate the work piece. What happened was it started, when I tried it, it just kept I thought it would also help me with the spacing, but it ended up chewing this all up. And the MDF is so soft that it will not work to do 5 or 6 of these features. So you really have to do a separate one for each one, which means you got to change the position of the whole thing. Everybody following so far? Sometimes I'm not as clear as I think I am. So what I do to help support this, this is just a little piece of plywood and a screw. And I can see that this isn't sitting real flat, so I'm just going to put these on to as an extra precaution, because I don't want this piece to rotate, or worse yet, go flying out into the audience. I might have to move these as I do my circle, but I don't think so. I'm spacing them pretty much dead center between the circles that I'm going to make. Now the next decision I have to make is how many of these rings I want to put on it. Not how many features, but how many cuts for each feature. And I'll show you the parting tool that I use. One comment about the type of wood that you use: the denser the wood, the cleaner your cuts are going to be. If you try to do this with wood that's too grainy, maple wouldn't be too bad. Walnut wouldn't work quite so well. That's a piece of sycamore which cut fairly cleanly. It's kind of like maple. Cocobolo should be great. I haven't used cocobolo. I didn't have any until I found this chunk a few weeks ago. It was a big block, and I just resawed it into discs. So the next decision is we've got our center here. How many, or how far in are we going to go? I did bring, I don't know if I'll use this, but just kind of as an example, it'll be on the back side. So I don't want to, I'll make a pencil mark. I don't want to go too much further in than this. So that means I'm going to keep them fairly small. Something like that. How thick is this wood? Oh, yeah, about a quarter. If I were doing a full Weissluck where I was coming in from the back, the depth of cut becomes really critical, and the only way that your image will be revealed is if you make the cut coming in from the front side to exactly meet the cut coming in from the back side. When I say exact, if you're off by a couple thousandths, you get a little, what I call hanging chad in there, where you've got to poke it out with a dental pick or a X-Acto knife. So that cut becomes extremely important. So I think for the first time, don't worry about the back. Just do the front and put the detail on it. These things here, generally, yeah. That one I didn't, because it fit so tightly. I actually had trouble getting it out. And one thing I did forget to do, I know I can get this one out because it wasn't so tight. You just drill a hole, like a half-inch hole anywhere in here, because if it's really tight in here, you're not going to be able to dig the thing out without damaging it. So you just take a little dowel and tap it out from the back once you've dismounted this thing from your piece of plywood. So I forgot to do that, but I'll get it out. Okay, now how do you do the spacing? One way, Hans Weissluck said in one of his presentations, he tried, when he was first doing this years ago, he tried I got to change this before we do that. He tried all kinds of ways to figure out the spacing, and he was trying to measure it with calipers and all kinds of things. He said it never came out right. He ended up just practice, and he did it all by eye. He never measured anything. And he said after a while, when you do enough, you get the feel for it. You also can use your parting tool as a measuring device, and which is actually probably what I'll do. I use this parting tool, and I'll explain why in a second. But if you make a mark here and just rock the parting tool a little bit. You're going to score a line, and then that will be a reference to make the next one. Put that corner of the parting tool in, come around. So you can use this to create very exact spacing all the way down. One thing I want to do is try to avoid, and it didn't work so well here, but I didn't lose them. If you see, I don't know if you can see on camera, very tiny little pieces of wood here. Fortunately, they stayed on. You want to try to space these cuts so you don't end up with a little sliver. It'd be nice to have more of a half circle there. So I'm going to try to do that, and I think I'll take my tool and just kind of walk it in, and hopefully I can, I'm going to use that beading tool as a spacer, and hopefully that won't happen again, because it's extremely fragile. Just a regular beading tool, and I'm just going to make a mark here. And you probably can't see them on camera, but I can. And this will just give me a starting point. So that's 8, 9. And this is where my bowl will be underneath, but it will be angled back this way, and I'm not going all the way through, so I can start my cuts right here, and I should, you're not going to be able to see that because it's a dark lead and dark wood. Okay, I think that's going to give me 6. Doesn't really matter. Now, to determine the depth, you do want to make them all the same depth. And when I'm doing one where I'm going to be doing both sides, I built a special gadget to control that depth. This is how I do it. I set this into my banjo, and then I set the depth here and adjust the banjo until it gives me the proper amount, and then I can repeat it, and I work my way across, and it works very well. For this, I don't really have to use this jig, and you don't have to make one. And I'll show you how to control that, or get the depth consistent on each one. And it's just a simple little piece of tape. He has. The other thing that I tried that didn't work very well was just using a Sharpie, a very fine tip Sharpie, and making a line on the tool, but it was hard to see. Major was up, thought I saw him here. There you are. He was up visiting me in Vermont when I was doing one of my first ones of these. And so we were kind of laughing about it because I was experimenting with all different kinds. And he was holding a light over here. He was holding an air hose over here because the chips get in the way of seeing what the tip of the tool is doing. So I really have to give him some credit for one of my early ones because it was a two-person job. So I'll put it on this side so you can see it. And we'll go in maybe a fat 1/8 of an inch. Doesn't really matter. Just you want to be all to be the same. Now we're almost ready to turn, but not quite. So now this is where the multi-axis part comes in. Don't want that one. We have to. We're going to have 5 different centers that we'll do, and I don't know if we'll have time to do all 5 of them, but you'll certainly see how it's done. And I did have to cut down this piece of MDF a little bit to fit on this lathe. Okay, so here's the center that we decided on. And if it doesn't go around all the way, then we'll just change the dimension a little bit. It doesn't. So rather than go and cut this down a little bit more, I'm just going to move my center in 1/4 of an inch, and I think that'll be enough. I've already got a line there. I'll just use that line. I do need a bigger lathe. Oh, I have one at home. All right, I think this is going to work. So I've put 8 holes in here. Obviously, I can't use them all each time because some of them are hanging out here. But put as many in as you can. And then you start adding weights to counterbalance it, and you just keep putting them on until the thing really is fairly well balanced. There's so much prep here, the turning part is kind of anticlimactic. It is dynamic, very. Just for balance, yeah. See, it still needs a little more. Instead of building this out where it could get in the way, it might be a safety thing, I'll just put a piece on the back. I think that'll be fine. Well, we're going to keep the speed down, so hopefully nobody has to play catch here. All right, check your clearance on everything. Yep, that needs to come down a little bit. I like that. I think that'll work. If anything, it's a little heavy. I'll move this one in a little, and we'll get it really spot on. When I was doing my experiment last week and had all that stuff there on the thing, I kept adding more and more chunks of wood, and it really got out of control and hit the light up above me. And I said, no, I think that we're going to change the program a little bit. Oh, I think we got it perfect. All right, now we just start making the cuts. It's important to have the tip of the tool pretty much on the center line, if anything, just a hair below it, but you don't want to be above it. And the trickiest ones are the ones near the center of the feature, because your radius is extremely tight, and your tool will start rubbing at the top and the bottom, and you'll end up not getting a nice square cut, which is why I like to avoid having this center one on the piece, particularly just for doing this kind of thing. For doing something more like one of those where you're really trying to create the artistic effect, I think it's important to have this little dot in the feature, because if you're trying to make it look like an insect or a bird or whatever it is you're going for, that becomes the head of the bird. So it actually serves a function when you hold the thing up and look at it in the light. So let me see. I didn't put the marks here, but I do have roughly where that bowl will be underneath, right about there. So that's where I'm going to make the first one. We'll see how good my spacing is. So any questions so far? This morning I was here helping Frank set up. We brought out this. I'm going to actually leave the grinder on because it's really critical that you keep touching that point up. And I know you're going to say, oh, it's going to change the dimension. Yes, it will, but at the same time, every time you plunge this thing in, you're pushing that tape back very slightly. So even though I'm grinding the tool to keep it sharp, this dimension here where the tape is changing just enough to offset that tiny bit of grind. The nice thing about the CBN wheel, you're just removing so little material. You're just touching that edge, and I'll make maybe 2 or 3 cuts, and then I'll touch it up again. So, any questions before we start? Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to, because I can do it here with this one, I'm going to start in here and work my way in. We have not set in stone where this bowl is going to be attached to the back of it. So I can get my spacing beginning here and coming across instead of starting out here and working back. I want to lower my tool rest very slightly. And I will keep the speed down. I'm not going to wear the mask. Not that I think it's going to come off the lathe, but normally I would, of course, be using a mask. Let's adjust your banjo. What? Did anybody talk? That's running very smoothly. Okay, I need a pencil mark to get my first cut. I'm going to start it right there. Hopefully that'll show. I need a piece of tape on my side of the tool, not your side. Sorry. I think this one's okay. Now, in using the tool as a spacer, I'm lining up the right-hand edge of the tip of the tool with the edge of my previous cut and just scoring. Now that ticking noise means that I didn't get this exactly flat in my jam chuck. That's very important because you want everything to be consistent. We can live with it tonight. I should have checked that and fine-tuned the back where I was turning away some of that MDF. Okay, once again, I'll use the tool as a spacing device, but I really end up going by eye quite a bit. That sounds suspiciously like a screw, and it is. We didn't need it anyway. This, by the way, was this corner as I reached around to turn the piece off, so the lathe off. So be aware of when you're doing anything that's out of round like this. You've got like a wing bowl. You've got pieces there that you can't see, but they're there to nail you. One more. Can you see that in the? Perfect. Just what I wanted. Now it's just a case of changing the position of the jam chuck and moving on to the next one. So I don't know if you want to see me do all 5 of these or do one more. Any questions? No, I could work on my jam chuck a little bit to try to make that better if you want to see how to fix something. No, my depth was okay because I just took the tool and I kind of rammed it in. But if you've got the jam chuck set up right, each time the tool makes contact with this surface here, it's going to be, you're not going to get that ticking. It's going to be consistent all the way around. So I've got high and low points here. I don't think it's worth fixing, but that if I'd been a little more careful in digging out that MDF to make this jam chuck, I would have eliminated that. The other thing that I always do when I'm setting up this piece, and I should have done it here because I'm on a different plate from the one I was using. This piece, well, we could maybe tell. See how my big piece of plywood here is doing a little bit of this. So the error really is in this, not in my jam chuck. So I can't really go back and fix this now. But what I would do at home, obviously, I'd take take my counterbalances off, and I'd take a scraper or something and just bring it across here. And then I have a sanding board that I use for my segmented work. Just put that on it, and it would smooth it out. And so I should have done that first. That's where the error was. So we'll just live with it. I don't know if how many of you have tried multi-axis work. It's really a lot of fun to take pieces and mount them in different positions and approach your workpiece. The absolute master at that is a guy called Derek Weidman, and he will take a piece of wood on a lathe, and he will make these animal heads, and he will mount that thing. He's got different ways of grabbing it on both sides, and he will chuck it up in 20 different positions, and he will turn a little bit, move it again, turn a little more, and he has this all in his head, and he ends up with an animal. face or something that they're not realistic, but they give you they tell you what it is that he's trying to accomplish. Derek Weidman, yeah, he was at the symposium, Florida Symposium 2 years ago, and every time he does a demo, he really wows the audience because he's so incredible. He's a real showman and performer. He puts on a good act, but he comes up with this stuff, and he'll ask for audience participation. He'll put a block of wood on it and say, "Okay, ma'am, what would you like to see?" And she'll say, "Oh, how about a rhinoceros or something?" And he will say, "That's pretty difficult, but we'll see." And he'll end up with something that you can identify as a rhinoceros. Amazing guy. And nobody had really done that kind of turning before that I'm aware of. Yeah. And oh, yeah. Well, I have all the screws in here that I can, but let me just use a pencil to determine that ahead of time, and then I won't. Yes, sorry, I should be repeating all the questions for people at home. The question was, should I, because I just dinged one of my screws in the last one, should I remove either of these? And so what I'm going to do is just go out as far as I think I need and see if that's going to be a problem. That's way bigger than where I'll be going. So no, won't be a problem this time. But that is something to check. You can see, I think the camera will pick it up. I just barely dinged that screw, which is why I had to stop it and take it out. Okay. It did, and I'm going to sharpen it again. All right, we're ready to go there. I think this piece of tape will work for at least one more. I'm going to try to get this one exactly the same as the other one. So what I'm going to do is take my calipers and put a pencil line on where I want that first one to be. Now I can't tell which line is the one I want. Because I've got two lines on there. This is the one that I want. Okay. I'll put a fresh piece of tape on it for the next one. Well, I'm a little off from that one. The size of this isn't the same as that, but it's close. So, and then you just continue and work your way around. Would anybody like to see me do a couple more or questions or? I don't know how we're doing for time. Right. That isn't the plan for this one. Although what I would do after doing all 5 of these is turn it over. If I were doing that, I'd be much more fussy about the depth of these cuts. Here, if I'm a few thousandths from difference from one to another, doesn't matter. If I were going to do both sides, I would then go to this system here, where I'll set it up and show you. It gives me really good control over that depth. So I will determine what I see. Now the point of the tool is sitting right on the surface, and I don't know if you can see that gap right there. I don't know if they can see it at home. Okay, this gap will end up being the depth of cut. And usually I'll take a little stick of wood and I'll put it here, and I'll get loosen this and set my tool to the depth that I want. The little sliver of wood that I stick in here will be the depth of cut. And if my jam chuck is running nice and true, which this one is not, but if it were, every cut would be within a couple thousandths of the previous one, and that's the way you get enough precision. So when you turn it over and put it on the back, I'll take it out and I'll show you how I would be doing it if I were going to do that, unless you want to see me do one more circle. Okay. It's fine, thanks. Not yet, but the demo's not over. It is more true, but it doesn't hold up. This plywood I've been using for a couple of years, and I do, as I said before, I should have trued it up before I started. The MDF is, you kind of use it once and almost throw it away. It's too mealy. It won't last. Oh yeah. And because there's a little flat spot right there, that'll come out very nicely. See, this was because I didn't get it perfectly round, so how convenient is that? Okay, you can see I went almost halfway through. It doesn't really matter if you go to the midpoint. The important thing is that all of these cuts, and if you look at them, the depth really is quite consistent. All of these cuts on the front side have to be one depth. All your cuts on the back have to be another depth. So if I were doing that with this one, I would turn it over, and I intentionally put about a half a degree chamfer on this so it would fit tightly. So it's not going to really go in there. It's close. So I would take this and go back to center, and then decide on how many grooves I want to put on the back side, and then I would go ahead and make them. Again, making sure everything is running true. And this would all be on only on one axis, whereas on here you have 5 axes. And I think when I do pieces that are more art pieces, I want to turn as much detail as I can. And if you look at some of Weissluck's work, he will actually he'll do something like this, and then he'll make another axis here, like that. He'll make a whole nother. He might even go down here and make some little tiny ones. It's unbelievable how detailed his work is, and I was going to show you some of my, well, here's one. I don't know what the dimension of that tool is, but it's got to be only about 20 thousandths of an inch. He uses tools like this all the time. This I mostly do for just cleaning out something and kind of getting in there to remove a little bit more material when I don't want the full width of the parting tool. And I have a bunch of different ones that I've made. Old Sawzall blades actually make great tools, and you can shape them very easily. I have this is a sort of a rhetorical question. Who sharpens? These are just carbon steel. They're not high-speed steel, obviously. Some people say it's okay to put them on a CBN wheel. Some people say never do because it loads the wheel up. So I tend to err on the side of caution, and I go to an old-fashioned stone wheel when I want to sharpen these because they are so soft. But you could make a really fine point out of this. You can take an Allen wrench, which is pretty hard. You can shape a beautiful cutting tool out of an Allen wrench. I think Weissluck actually used some in one of his demos. So anyway, you have lots of choices. You don't just go to craft supplies and order up a parting tool. You can really make your own for a lot of it. But these are 3 different ones that I use for different applications. The finer your cut is, the more grooves you're putting in there, the harder your wood has to be. And that's really critical. If you look at Weissluck's work, he uses almost exclusively German blackwood, which, African blackwood, he's German. What's the, you gave me a little piece of it, that white stuff. Boxwood. True boxwood is just a beautiful cutting wood. Frank had a little tiny piece that he gave me, and I couldn't believe how crisply that cuts. Charlie. Yeah, yeah. And you even have a handle on it. Yeah, yeah. No, you have lots of options. And the more you do with any kind of turning, you're going to be making your own tools for very specific applications. I mean, look at Frank's shop here. He's got 10,000 tools in there that he's accumulated, and most of them, a lot of them he's made himself just to do a certain operation. Um, Anybody else have questions? Yeah? No, you cannot see it, but you can hear it. It will, as your tool just breaks through to touch these grooves, it'll make a little bit of a different sound. I did a demo here several years ago, just doing a basic multi-axis one, and I told people that, because somebody asked the same question, and I said, no, but you'll be able to hear it when that tool just starts to break through. And sure enough, it made a very slightly different sound, and you really have to be listening for it. You can usually, yeah, yeah, unless you've got a death grip on it, well, which you don't want to have do, but yeah. I wouldn't use only that. I'd use some kind of a system like I have here. Another way is you can go in a little bit. This depth gauge on your, when we use calipers, we tend to use either this or this, and not so often this. But you can set your depth here, and you can go in, and when you think you're close, check it. I mean, it's tedious and slow because you got to stop your work and put this in to see if you're where you want to be. But yeah, this is another way to do it. And you mean the little tiny pieces that you? Oh, because you're still leaving. Oh, I know what you're saying. Everything's crisscrossed in there, so it's supporting itself. You're not making a cut here. Right. You're not making a cut like this back here. If you did that, if you did the same thing, it would fall apart. But what you're doing is you're making grooves like this. So everywhere you've got a groove on this side, you've got a piece coming around on the front. So you have multiple places where those ridges, where there's still material left, are holding it all together. Yeah, pass one of those around and you'll see. It is amazing. Correct. That's concentric instead of eccentric. Yeah. Yeah. No, if you just flip it over and do the same thing, you're going to have pieces flying. Yeah. Well, you could. That would almost be enough. I wouldn't. Yeah. The more your grooves are parallel, the dicier it is. The more they end up going across, the grooves on the back go across the ones on the front, the tighter the whole thing will be. Yeah. I start from the outside and go in because I do want my outer strip of wood a little wider than the rest of them. And I'll take a measurement. I'll measure this point here and just scribe it on the back, so I've got something to shoot for. And then I'll just work my way in, and when I'm close to where I want to be, then I'll stop. Right, and you wouldn't want to get all the way out here and end up with a little sliver of wood, because you've kind of set your dimension by working on the front. Anything else, Steve? Yeah, yeah, that's kind of. I mean, Weissluck says it calls them insects, but they do take on a kind of a. Yeah. What's the word? Oh, that's a new word to me. And believe me, I've done lots of these, and I've thrown a lot in the burn pile because it is so easy, and you make one mistake, and you really ruin the piece. So, um, but have fun with it and experiment. And just try a few simple ones like this. When you feel confident doing these, flip it over and do the backside. Hans Weissflog, Weissflog. Weissflog, Weissflog. And he's very well known now. You just Google him and you'll, or go to Pinterest or one of the image sites, put his name in, and you'll get 100 of his pieces. And kind of as a little side note, his son is a very accomplished turner as well. Can't think of his name, George or Johann or something. He was named Artist of the Year. There's a big woodworking museum in Philadelphia, this Center for Art in Wood. And they started doing I think it was a Bob Stocksdale annual memorial trophy. And this boy, he was really in his 20s, barely 20, was the first recipient of that award. And his work is very different from his father's, but it's very precise, very small pieces, delicate, beautifully turned and balanced. Just check it out. It's fun to look at it. Anything else?